Hi there, it's Adrian here, and today we're going to discuss squatting. Obviously we're going to discuss this from the perspective of the Alexander technique because, well, I'm an Alexander technique teacher, that's what we do here. So this may be a slightly different squatting video to others you may have seen. I'm aware there's quite a few out there on squatting. This will be slightly less about body mechanics and a little more about the quality of our thinking during it, how our thinking changes our ability to move freely. And that's what I'm interested in here, your ability to move freely, not correctly. There's no such thing as a correct squat as such. There's no idealized correct squat. They're as individual as our fingerprints. So there's going to be a bit of exploration for you to do to get a feel for how far apart you need your feet, how you need to angle them out a bit. That's going to be for you to explore a bit and not for me to be prescriptive, telling you how it should be. There is no should, we're all unique. Why would you want to squat? Why am I interested in helping you with this? Well, I guess it's something I get asked about, so that's one reason. Two, it's normal functional movement. If you can't squat, you are disabled. It's as simple as that. I know we don't have, certainly in the West, much cultural reason to squat on a daily basis, which is a shame, because that's how we end up losing the ability. But it's worth getting the ability back because it's great for the lower back and the hips and the ankles to really free them up. Particularly if you've been sat at a computer or your desk all day long, you go into squat for 20-30 seconds, it'll really open your lower back nicely and undo the ills of a day in the office. Now, we know anecdotally Alexander was quite keen on squatting for himself, but it's not actually one of the procedures he left us. We end up with a series of formal procedures to explore movement, and squatting isn't one of them, which is kind of a surprise when you consider how much he liked doing them himself. There's anecdotal stories of people going to his office wondering where he is and realise, then he pops up from behind his desk having been squatting behind there between clients, just freeing up his own back and just generating some nice free movement for himself. So why didn't he offer it to us as a general procedure? Well, I think there's two reasons. I think one, it's become hard enough for most people in the West that it's basically too much. By too much, I mean we're looking in movement for you not to generate a reaction. That slight startle reflex, that when we go from one state of minding our own business to another state of, ooh, I'm not sure, that reaction. And whenever that reaction happens, there's always a tightening of the muscles that goes with it that makes the movement harder, which we then react to, so it all spirals out of control. And it turns out just doing the first half of a squat, going to sit, because that's what sitting is. And in fact, this in many ways is a follow-on video on my last video on sitting. So I'll link to that below in the description. I thoroughly recommend you watch that because it's essentially teaching you to do the first half of the squat. Now, the first half of the squat is the easier half. And even that is enough to make people react. So that's one reason why Alexander didn't choose to use squatting as one of his formal procedures, because effectively it was just a bit too hard for certainly his client base, based in London at the time, the turn of the last century. The other reason I think has to do with the way people think about squatting, that I think he was concerned. He used this term called physical culture, which he used it a bit in a derogatory way, to be honest. But if you tell someone to do a squat, they're going to think they have to achieve a squat in a way that, in a thinking style, our terminology, our jargon, if you like, we would call end gaining. Trying to achieve an end result without considering how you're going to achieve it. And I think there's something about being in a squat that someone's going to say, well, I've got to be in it. However, I've got to achieve it. And we don't really care if you achieve it or not. We care about the process. And if the process is good, the end results are given. If the process is good only up to a point, and then you fail, there's no point going any further through the process. You need to work on that ability to get through the process to get you lower, for example. So we always work on the process. So I'm going to give you a few little thoughts on how to help that process along. So, okay, let me go and stand over here so you can see me. I'm going to probably have to speak a bit louder, my microphone's not great. So assuming you've watched my previous video, I'll turn sideways. If there was a chair there, which there isn't, but if there was, I would do the same thing. I would lower myself in space until, my bum hit the chair. And then I could hinge back, which I'm not going to do because I'd obviously fall over. And we want to do that in a way that doesn't generate a change in our thinking. As I said probably in my last video, our ability to stay cool as a cucumber. I'm fine here, I'm fine here, I'm fine here, yeah, whatever. But if I get here and I'm kind of a bit unsure, you notice people pull their shoulders up a bit, they pull on their neck a bit, it all gets a bit stiff. But it's that thinking. Now, you're going to need to do this even just getting to a chair. Can I just be here, whatever. And at any point, as you're going to a chair, you should be able to stop and turn around. Now, if you're going to a full squat, the chair's not going to stop you, so you can go lower. But as you go lower, it's going to get harder. If you're not, assuming you're struggling with your squatting. I do have clients occasionally that on their first lesson, they squat beautifully. I'm like, wow, they're better at it than I am. But under the assumption you're looking for help for your squatting, why else would you look it up on YouTube? What you need to do is actually really be on top of your thinking and be honest with yourself. So that as you go down, if you notice, you're fine here, you're fine, whatever. If you just notice in your mind, I feel a little at ease. There's something I'm not happy about. At that moment, stop. Do not go any lower. Just stay there. Which, coincidentally, is what we classically call a monkey, position mechanical advantage. It's a way to lower yourself in space, to use your hands at a lower level. It could be snooker, it could be golf, it could be washing your hands. So, getting to a squat could be said to be a series of infinite monkeys. If I can get kind of a Shakespeare joke in there. But you stop at that point where you've essentially reacted. The earliest you can catch yourself out, you go, oh, I'm unhappy for some reason. Stop, do not go any lower. At this point, let me face this way, why not? At this point, just move about. Because one of the reasons you're likely to have reacted is because you think you're off balance. So you don't have control. And balance is a movement. Even just standing, I'm moving. It may not be that visible. Or it was then because I was purposely overdoing it. But even in standing, we move all the time. So skillfully it might not be that visible, but always a movement. That's the balancing act. If you can prove to yourself here that you can move, you're in balance. If you're in balance, why worry? And then come back up. And basically repeat that process a number of times. What you might find is the next time you do it, you go a bit lower. You go, oh, all right. Find that point where you think you're reacting, move, come back up. Do it again. Oh, you get lower. Can I move? Yes, I'm fine. Now, if you want, what you can do is get to a point, think that's enough, move, and you can just see from that point, if you could then go a bit lower, move about, go a bit lower, move about, go a bit lower, until you're all the way down. But initially, I recommend not doing that. Just to, kind of in the thinking, not to get into that end-gaining kind of thinking of, got to get lower. You want to avoid that kind of thinking. So that's one tip I recommend. The other, actually, let me come back. The other is, and again, I think I'll have to put something in the description below, a video I did on gravity, which I'll recommend you watch as well. It kind of works the opposite way you think it does. You're not being dragged down. Gravity isn't really a force that pulls you down. And there's a very counterintuitive aspect to it, that in fact the floor is really pushing up under your feet. Now this is a bit of a psychological trick. It really worked for me, and it's worked pretty well so much for my clients I've shared it with so far. So I think for whatever the psychological trick it works, it's not unique to me. but it was something that I completely unlocked something for me. Let me just show you something very quickly. It was a picture my daughter drew years ago for my video on gravity. So the basic thing going on here is I've got a man in a rocket ship accelerating at 9.8 meters per second squared, which is 1g. So what that basically is trying to say is if you're on a rocket ship accelerating at 1g, you can't tell the difference between being on a rocket ship and being on the Earth. They're the same physical experience. Now, if he was to bend his legs up underneath him, the floor of the ship would come closer up to his torso. And that's the thought that I used for myself randomly one day, and that really helped to free up my squatting. I'll be honest, I'm not the world's greatest squatter, and that's probably why, you know, I'm doing this video, because we end up as teachers being obsessed about the things we struggle with. And squatting was one of mine. Even as a child, I couldn't sit cross-legged, you know, so I really had to work on it. And what I found was, as I went to squat, I would spend like a few moments, just seconds, doing what we call in the Alexander technique, inhibiting. I was trying to just get rid of any issues in my mind, worries, concern, trying to be not building up this movement into a thing. Because the moment you make squatting a thing, it's game over. Because you're already hesitant. The moment you turn something into a thing with a capital T, you're making life difficult for yourself. And I would catch myself out. It annoyed me for months. I was getting really good at my squatting, but I'd always just pause for a second, getting ready for this thing. And the key that unlocked that door was this gravity thing. If I thought of just bringing the floor up under my torso, so instead of thinking myself going down, of course I am in relation to the Earth, but think of bringing the floor up to me, for some reason that worked really nicely for me. I no longer needed to care about it as an activity. I lost that concern. So I share that with you. I hope it works for you. It certainly did for me. So that's just two things to help you go through a process of getting into a squat. So let's just talk a little bit about stretching, because one of the benefits of a squat is it gives a nice stretch to the lower back, the hips, the ankles even. Now I've got a video on stretching, which I'll put in the link below as well. But the reason we need to discuss it is because it is a stretch. And if you're struggling with a squat because you're currently quite tight, so we have tension that may be from a reaction to the movement itself, which I hope that movement pattern helped to allay those fears of not being off balance, so you get rid of that psychic tension that's displayed through physical tension. But you may of course just be quite tight anyway habitually, and your full body weight going through, you know, through the hips and lower back might be too much. And if it's too much, what will happen is your nervous system will think the muscles are under attack, and it will try to protect them, and the only way it knows how, by tightening. So, you know, actually 99% of people probably, all right, I made that statistic up, but 99% of people who are trying to stretch are actually tightening. And what you really need to do is to release into direction. And I'll talk about that in the other video. So we need to prepare you for the full squat in advance of actually trying it for real. And there's a couple of ways you can do that. One is not very practical, but I'll mention it because I used it, even though not being practical. It's not practical because it requires a swimming pool with steps coming out. And I just happened to be on holiday in Turkey at the time. It was baking hot, I was in the pool, arms outside, just floating, legs slightly bent, so I was thinking, oh, I'm in a classic Alexander monkey. In fact, this was going on probably in my first year of Alexander training. And I thought to myself, if there's less water, I would sink lower and I would be in a lower monkey. And as I'm thinking that, I could see the steps out and I had a light bulb moment. So I spent the rest of the week going up one step at a time, sinking a bit. And of course there's water, so there's movement. By the end of the week, I managed to get completely out onto land. And then I could start really trying to open up my lower back and my ankles and hips and knees even. But that got me through that stage quite nicely. Now the other way we can do it, I'm just checking the camera, yeah, you can see the corner of the room. I've got a feeling my head's going to be off camera, forgive me, is we lie on the floor and put our legs and either straight up the wall, that can be useful, not for too long, I'll show you, but not too long to begin with, because you can end up with terrible pins and needles in your feet, but also feet flat on the wall. So it's like a squatting-like motion, but you're not dealing with your full body weight going through it, and you're not dealing with your balance and coordination at all. So it's easier. So it's much easier for you to release into it. So let me show you. So I'm going to get down. Yes, I think my head's off, but there's my feet right up the wall. You can't actually see my head, but I would recommend putting a book or a yoga block under your head to support it. So that's my feet straight up. And then you can have your feet like that. And you can experiment. And you just sit like this for like 10 minutes, and it really opens all that up area really nicely without you having to worry about your balance coordination at all. I do hope that comes up, the sound's all right on the video there. I was a bit far away. Any other thoughts on that? Oh yes, another thought is something else that can make it easier is either using 2 books around the same size or a couple of yoga blocks, put them under your heels, and that will make it slightly easier. If you're outside wanting to experiment, there's a slope, face downhill. If you have high heels, you'll notice it might be easier to do it in high heels. I don't wear high heels, but yes, having your heels raised can make life easier too. So I think that's enough to be getting on with, and I'll leave that there. I think there's quite a lot for you to play with. If you're interested in online Alexander lessons, do get in touch. I also teach in person here in North London, and I shall see you next time. Okay, bye.